just after my 18th birthday, I committed a robbery, and unrelated to that, I shot two people.
Oh, wow.
I was in the middle of this kind of crazy time in my life where addiction and paranoia and insecurity and insanity was running everything that I did. And it was the worst that I was ever. It was the worst person that I ever was. And those were the moments that were really life defining moments because I harmed people irreparably. I, I started kind of experimenting with drugs and alcohol when I was younger, but I never really had the experience. I was one of those people who entered a program of recovery before I even really knew about drugs and alcohol. Like I had been exposed to them, but I hadn't really lost myself. But I got in trouble in 8th grade. I had some pot at school, and my dad basically said, "Look, I don't trust you to be home alone. So you're going to this meeting. You don't have to participate. Or you're going to be there or you won't." And there was this amazing girl there. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going. Like, if she's there, I'm going to go. And that was my introduction. And I didn't learn anything but how to smoke cigarettes and drink coffee and like talk shit. I didn't learn any of the principles. So when I was 16, I decided, I don't need this anymore. Let me go out and, be with other kids my age. Let me do something different. And so I started drinking and I started getting high. And I can't remember who it was. Somebody said that addiction is failing to meet your standards faster than you can lower them. And that's really what happened. It happened gradually at first. It would be like, well, I'm never going to drink during the week. And then, I would start drinking during the week. Well, I'm never going to drink during the day. And then I would start drinking during the day. Or it was these gradual things. And I said hurtful things and I did hurtful things. And it was kind of a compounding issue because then, I would be drinking for the shame that I felt, or I would be drinking for the guilt that I felt, or I would be drinking because I didn't want to deal with what I felt. And there were times that I would kind of sober up a little bit, and there were times I would really get out there. And it was just back and forth, but I was still going to school. I worked from the age of 14 on in some kind of job. So I was like semi-functional. And then I found cocaine, and it was like a supercharger. It was like everything that I always wanted. I went from insecure and unsure and feeling, really to feeling amazing, to feeling like Superman, like I had all the answers, like I could do anything, and then suddenly needing more of it 30 minutes later so that I could feel secure and feel whatever. And it was just like a snap of the fingers. And within 3 months, I went from, taking a year off from college and deciding what I was going to do with my life to driving down the road shooting somebody after an argument. It was just I completely lost myself in that. I lost myself. I lost my values. I lost my identity. I lost my ideas. It's hard to describe to somebody who hasn't been in a really toxic relationship or hasn't, suffered from addiction or haven't suffered from trauma. We lose ourselves. We lose what we're listening to. And sometimes that voice is still there. Like there was a time when we committed the robbery, we thought we were breaking into a home that was empty or that nobody was at. And there was a voice in the back of my head that was like, you shouldn't do this. And rather than listen to that voice and be like, okay, no, I said, no, I can't disappoint my friends or, they want to do this or we've got to do this or, I can't be a coward. No, being a coward was going through with this horrible act. Being courageous would have been saying, no, I don't want to do this. I don't care if you're my friends. I don't care about this. I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to listen to my heart. But I didn't do that. And so I went through with it. And there was one of those situations where, in the actual act, there were often times where I felt completely powerless. I felt completely out of control. I felt like I didn't have a choice. But there was always a point up to that point that I did have a choice, that I decided to start getting high, or that I decided to get that gun, or I decided to get wherever I was. And that transition was really ugly because there were periods where I had a choice and I could have stopped. But then there were periods where, like I said, I felt completely out of control. And yeah, both of those incidents were just, like I said, they were the worst part of my life. We had run out of cocaine, we had run out of money, we had run out of everything. And if you've ever done cocaine, if you're one of those addictive people, like every now and then I meet somebody who's like, yeah, I tried cocaine, I didn't really like it. And I'm like, what? Like, this guy's got to be lying. Because for me, from the first moment when I did cocaine, I realized this is what I want to feel for the rest of my life. And I never wanted to stop. And once I really became strung out on it, it wasn't a physical addiction, but it was the point that I would do anything to get more of this because I felt like I was going to die if I didn't get it. It's an indescribable kind of mental phenomenon or emotional phenomenon. And then additionally in alcohol, I was physically dependent upon alcohol. If I didn't get alcohol, I would go into DTs. So I was drinking myself, I was getting this cocaine. And then when we ran out and I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to buy a bottle of liquor tomorrow. We don't have any money. My co-defendant said, hey, I used to work for these people and they have all this cash money because they hire legal immigrants and they don't pay them and they just keep the cash. And so that was enough for me. I was like, well, we're not really bad people. We're Robin Hood. We're saving from, those people who are just some horrible justification that was entirely self-serving. That was entirely based on my desire to fill my own addiction and feed what I wanted and what I needed rather than paying any attention to anybody else. And again, we thought we were breaking into a home that was empty. We'd gone by the house earlier and people were there. And then when we went back by, the cars were gone. So we thought nobody was there. But somebody was. We went in the back door and my co-defendant went in the front door and there was somebody there. There was a maid there. And so he abducted her. He had a gun and he put it to her head and he tied her up. And it's this horrible thing that in some ways it's hard to connect to what I did because I feel so different than I was then, but I know I was there. I know I did this thing. And again, I try to remember one of the most gratifying things about TikTok has been interacting with people who are victims of crime similar to mine and being able to tell our story, to be able to talk about what their experience was, to be able to share mine, to be able to ask them, like, what can I do? What could somebody do to help you make you feel safer? Or sometimes they've asked me, like, how did you pick which house you went into? Because I want to make sure that my house never gets broken into again. And these have been these incredibly healing interactions. And I'm so grateful for people's courage and willingness to do that. So anyways, that's the story on the robbery. And it was just a horrible idea. And there was no money, or if there was, I didn't get any. Maybe one of them got some, but I left with like a bottle of liquor and a digital camera. I mean, it was just an insane idea. It was such an irrational thing. People are like, well, people won't commit crimes if they know there's going to be punishment. It's like, I don't think you understand the mindset of a drug addict trying to get more drugs. There's no reason there. There's no forethought. There's no like rational planning. And then the shooting was, I think it was about a week later. It felt like a day later because time was really kind of compressed then. But so we were all hanging out at the house. We had managed to get some money. I had found somebody else to front me more coke, which was a terrible idea because I never paid any of the dealers that I owed. But I'd managed to get a bunch of coke. So we were partying like everything was okay. And one of the guys got a call from his girlfriend, and she said, "Hey, these guys are at the house and they won't leave me alone. And, can you come home?" And so I wanted to be the hero. I wanted to, use that cocaine power and save the day. So I got on the phone and said, "Put him on the phone. Who the F do you think you are? You're not going to mess with her, and y'all are going to leave or else." And so we got into this huge shouting match with something that didn't have anything to do with me. And it turns out I think the guy actually owed them money. And like, it was something that I had nothing to do with, but I wanted to play hero. So we shouted at each other and we said, "Yeah, well, I'll meet you here and we'll meet you here." And so we agreed to meet. And then somewhere along the way, like it finally entered into my mind and grew into the point that when I finally got there, I was like, this is a terrible effing idea. And so it was one of those moments I had a choice to go left or right. And I went right. I left. Like I drove away. I realized like, I don't need to be here. This is not going to end well. Like I'm trying to do the right thing. And they chased me. So they were chasing me down the street and they were revving up the engine and they were going back and forth and they were acting like they were going to swerve into me. And I had the gun on me because I always had a gun on me because I thought everybody was going to rob me and everybody was going to try to shoot me. And when the passenger reached around to grab something, I just opened fire. And I don't know whether he was reaching for a gun. I don't know. I know they found a gun in the car, but I think it was a rifle, so he couldn't have even been reaching for it. But in my mind, I thought he was going to kill me. It was just this instant response of, I need to defend myself. This like lizard brain place. And so I did. I opened fire on the car and I drove off. And I remember the sound finally coming back in. And I remember realizing that I was crying, that I was just like completely out of my mind because it struck me for a second. Like I just shot somebody. And I couldn't deal with it. I got back to the house and I drank a bottle of liquor and I did some more coke, but I drank so much that I finally kind of passed out for, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes or an hour or something, because I couldn't deal with it. It was one of those times where I said, this is such a big emotion. This is such a big experience. I can't deal with it. And that defined most of my life. Most of my life was, this feels uncomfortable. I need to numb it away. This feels uncomfortable. I need to make it go away whatever way I can. And so I did. And then I think the next day, the cops got us. That there had been a description out, or I don't remember exactly how it happened, but they figured out that it was us, that both events were, and they came with the SWAT team. And I remember, I think I'd finally passed out because other than that, like hour or two that I passed out drunk, I'd been up for like 2 or 3 days, and I like kind of passed out in the seat because we'd run out of coke again. And somebody started yelling. They were yelling in Spanish, "La policía negra están afuera," like the police in black are outside. And I was like, what the fuck? So we were in a duplex and I remember running to the top of the steps, like maybe I can get out and just like pretend I'm somebody else. And I ran out the door, like straight into the barrel of a gun. And he said, "I will shoot you dead, boy." And I said, "All right, like clearly I got it. Okay." And strangely, I felt the most amazing sense of relief. Yeah. Because I had finally been stopped, because I finally didn't have to do this anymore. I didn't have to like figure out where I was going to score. I didn't figure out what I was going to like. I could finally just relax. And it was amazing because I did. I felt my shoulders drop. I realized how I'd been doing. And when they took me to the jail, I slept for like 3 days straight. I think I woke up for meals, ate them, and then just went straight back to sleep. And that was the experience that I had.
That's amazing. And well, not really amazing, but just that the climax to it, it's interesting. It's very, very interesting.
I didn't kill anyone, but I did damage that will never go away. I, emotionally and physically scarred people. So then that was the beginning of this process. So a few weeks after my 18th birthday, I was arrested, rightfully so. And I was in the jail and I had to make this decision. What was I going to do with my life? Was I going to sit here and feel sorry for myself and feel like the victim? Or was I going to, take this time as an opportunity to grow and to do something different? And it wasn't like a clear-cut answer. It wasn't like, oh, today I'm going to seize the day and everything's going to be great and I'm a new person. It was definitely one of those, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of situations. And so fast forward about 8 months, I went for sentencing. I had pled guilty to the things I'd done because I had done them and I was taking responsibility. And the guidelines for that day were 8 to 13 years. And then they called a recess in the court and they came back with new guidelines. It said 10 to 16 years. And I said, okay, well, my lawyer advised me to go ahead and do this. Yeah, I'm going to lose a big chunk of my life, but I did something terrible. It's right. It's just. So the judge sentenced me to 32 years in prison, which was
Oh,
twice the high point of the guidelines. And I just lost my mind. I remember being of two minds. I had two things happening. One, I was like completely feeling this self-pity and, oh, how could this happen? And I can't believe it, while, kind of in a state of shock, but also believing like, yeah, like that's how much of a piece of crap I am. Like that's what I deserve. Like he finally sees it, because my path through addiction and my path through insecurity was always because I never felt like I was enough. I always felt like there was something just fundamentally wrong with me. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't smart enough. I couldn't figure things out. And so this was a validation of that. This was somebody telling me, yeah, you're irredeemable. You deserve to spend basically the rest of your life in prison. And so it was this mixed reaction, and that reaction continued. I remember going back to the jail cell, and they actually put me in an isolation cell because I think they were afraid I was going to hurt myself. And listening to the radio, we had these little AM FM radios, and this Dave Matthews song came on the radio, and he said this thing about, grave digger, dig my grave shallow so I can feel the rain. And that was it. Like I just cracked and I just started crying and sobbing. It was, this experience of really feeling the grief for what I'd done, because at sentencing, the grandmother, one of the guys that I shot, had gotten up and told her story about hearing that her grandson had been shot and hearing that, he might not survive and not knowing what was going to happen. And that was just ripping me apart inside. So I was like reliving what I had done. I was realizing the trauma of it in a new way because I'd been exposed to that. And I was feeling sorry for myself because I'd just been sentenced to 32 years. And it was then this slow process of trying to figure out, how am I going to move forward? What am I going to do? And it was a struggle at first. I was really, really fortunate. The basis of my story, or of, the TikTok that I've done or everything, is that I had resources that other people didn't have. I had friends and family that supported me. I had access to psychologists. I had access to a meditation teacher. I had access to all these people and all this support that I was able to turn my life around, whereas most people don't. So I was able to go to college. I was able to start taking college classes while I was still in the jail. And it was incredibly expensive, and it took 15 years, and it took sending everything by hand and, in the mail. But I was able to get a college degree, and most people don't have that opportunity. Most people are lucky to get a vocational class if they can. And so I started on this path moving forward. And then I had these periodic times of kind of taking things for granted, and also just feeling sorry for myself. Be like, I've been doing really well, but I still have 25 years left. Like, I just don't care today. Like, I'd rather get high. I'd rather go drink. I'd rather go, do anything other than do the next right thing. And so it was this back and forth kind of thing where I would do good things. I wanted to be a good person. I wanted to, do helpful things. So I was continually doing something on that path, but a lot of times I was self-sabotaging. I was being selfish. I was getting lost in self-pity. And it was really back and forth until a number of years ago. So prison relationships are much more common and popular than you would think. There are a surprisingly large number of women that want to be with a guy who's in prison for whatever reason. So I entered into a relationship that was in some ways really wonderful and amazing, and in some ways really toxic. Somebody once said that, all her, kind of dark, ugly places came out to play with all my dark, ugly places. And it was just incredibly unstable, and it was incredibly unhealthy. And so in the middle of, all my drug use and all the things that I was doing, this relationship was happening. And I woke up one day and I wanted to kill myself. I knew I couldn't make it through another day. I knew this was not working. I didn't feel like I had any sense of hope. I had this time left in prison. I didn't have any will to live. And I had been meditating for a number of years at that point, and that had been really one of the transformational things. And it was really funny to say, like, yeah, I'm meditating, but I'm also doing drugs, or I'm meditating, but I'm also doing things. And that's what I mean about 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So I sat to meditate, and I found space for this feeling. I don't really know how to describe it. I don't really know what it is. I remember reading something in a Viktor Frankl book that spoke to me, but it was this sense of space that I could exist within this. Like I could hold this pain, this thing that I've been running from my whole life, this, kind of ugly monster that I felt like had been chasing me, that I've been trying to numb away with drugs and with sleep and with sex and with whatever it was. And for the first time in my life, I kind of felt okay. I kind of felt some sense of peace. And what I realized is I had to do things differently because this was not going to stay. So I got clean and I started working with other people. I started doing things dramatically different, and it made a huge difference in my life. Because up to that point, I had done fairly well in prison. I'd been able to get jobs. I was still working on my college degree. I'd been able to like kind of get myself in positions where I could, get extra food from the kitchen, or I could, do whatever. But I wasn't looking forward to the future. I wasn't really believing that I would get out one day. But that was when I realized I had I could continue to kind of think about myself and feel sorry for myself and go through what I was doing, or I could focus on other people. I could realize that I had an opportunity to share what had been so freely given with me with other people. And so that's what I did. I started mentoring people. At that point, I'd actually been tutoring a guy who wanted to go to college but didn't have the money to. So he would get college textbooks donated, and then we would go over the textbooks together because I had taken most of the classes he was taking. But I expanded that. I started mentoring in a mental health program. I started working with other people in a program of sobriety. I started just doing everything I could to get outside of myself, as well as taking care of myself and exercising and eating right, or as right as I can in prison, and doing these things. And there was this kind of immediate transformation in my life. One, I didn't want to kill myself anymore. Two, I realized that I was finding gratitude for things that I previously hadn't. And that was one of the most, I had somebody tell me this, look, you have to start being grateful, because you can sit here and you can feed this side of self-pity and anger and victimhood, or you can feed this side of gratitude. So I did a TikTok earlier tonight where I was talking about one of the things I did at Christmas, because Christmas was one of the most difficult times in prison. So every year I would do a Christmas card to every person that I knew, whether I hadn't heard from them all year, whatever it was. And it was two things. It was one, to say thank you for the people who were in my life, who had chosen to remember me, even though it was so easy to forget somebody behind bars. And two, it was to remind me how lucky I was to have people to write, to have people who wrote me and cared about me and thought about me, because there were so many people that didn't. And that's where I go back to having resources that other people didn't have. What I noticed is, I started feeding this kind of attitude of gratitude. I started feeling better about things, realizing I had an opportunity rather than, a terrible sentence. I had, people that I could connect with, and there were things that I could do. And it just changed the way that I saw the world. Excuse me, let me drink a sip of coffee real quick. Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted a monologue or if you wanted a dialogue. So I'm sorry if I'm taking
No, it's
all the
okay.
space.
Keep going. I'm loving this.
So after a few years of doing this, one of the things that somebody in a program of recovery had told me that was really helpful was, you can't control the outcome of any situation, but you can always do the next right thing. And that really struck me, because I realized, I can't make things happen a certain way. I can't save this person. I can't change this person. I can't even necessarily make things happen the way they want to be in my own life, or I can't make myself be a certain way, but I can do the next right thing. So I still had about 12 or 13 years left on my sentence. And I struggled with that. When I reached the halfway point of my sentence, which was about 14 years, because on 32 years, you have to do 28 with good time. That was strangely one of the worst days, other than the day that I wanted to kill myself, because it just felt like there's no way I can do another 14 years. Like, there's no way I can do this. And I remember that really distinctly. So slightly before I had decided, okay, I'm going to reach out and I'm going to do this petition for clemency. And this is an extraordinary petition because Virginia doesn't have parole. There's no way to get out early except basically going to the governor and saying, hey, I'm pleading for your mercy. I please just consider me. Please consider my situation. So I put together this petition for clemency, and it was really with the expectation of only knowing that I had done everything that I could, and not to try to expect that I would actually get out, but know that over the next 13 or 14 years, I could know at least I've done everything I could. So, I have to accept the outcome. And then it really started kind of turning into something, because up till this point, I had had people telling me I needed to believe that I deserved to get out. And I struggled with that because I had done irreparable harm to people. Who was I to say I deserve anything? And I still to this day don't feel comfortable saying I deserve anything. But I started realizing that my situation was different from other people, that, having gotten my college degree, but more than that, having worked with other people, having been licensed as a journeyman, having run mentor programs, having designed programs, having worked with guys one-on-one, I realized I really have made good use of my time. I really have done something with the sentence that was given to me. And then the fact that, I was barely 18 at the time of the offense, and that I was sentenced to twice the high point of the guidelines. So at this point, I already would have been home with good time had I gotten the high point of the guidelines, no less the middle of the guidelines. I started realizing, like, maybe there is some legitimacy to my claim. And that coincided with this amazing support I received from the outside. My mom was kind of stalwart, and she reached out and she got people to support me. But also, she ran a Facebook page for me, and all these people in the community started reaching out and saying, hey, we know about your story. We believe in you. We want to support you. Like, we're going to write a letter to the governor, or, hey, we want you to know we got a job for you when you get out, or, hey, if you need a place to stay. And it was amazing to see this kind of swelling of support. And all this happened and went on for a couple of years. And then, I didn't really believe. I was almost afraid of belief. Hope is that double-edged sword, because we need it to keep going. But sometimes we get so invested in things we're hoping for that if we get let down, we feel just destroyed. And this is actually kind of how I connected with my girlfriend. So back in 2019, when I put in the petition, Courtney was a reporter at a local news station. She did a story on me to highlight Virginia without parole, to highlight what it's like when people don't have access to a resource to reevaluate their situation. And we stayed in touch. We were kind of a reporter source. We had a bunch of bad things happen at the prison. We had a scabies outbreak. We had this captain who ordered the strip search of a child without her parents' consent. We had just these like horrible things happening, and she would report on them. She was willing to like stand up and give us a voice when we felt voiceless, which I thought was really amazing. And we stayed close. And then I don't know, maybe about a year in, she just had this kind of personal crisis in her life with somebody she really cared about. And she had to make a decision of whether to kind of keep me as a source or to like let me into her life as a friend. And so she told her boss, and she basically said, look, I can't report on this guy anymore because I have to ask him some questions because the person in her life was dealing with some issues that I'm really familiar with. So we became friends and, we kind of connected. And then in February of 2021 of this year, I got a notice. I got a notice from my mom that they had called her and said that my clemency petition would be looked at and that I could hope for an answer by the end of the year. And then within 12 hours of this happening, she had another personal crisis with somebody in her life. So we just connected. I called her to talk to her about my clemency thing, found out what had happened. And I said, look, I just want to talk to you. I want to check in on you. Give me 5 minutes every morning to make sure you're okay. And then, whatever. And one of the things we talked about was kind of the audacity of hope, the idea that even though it might crush us, even though it might kill us, we have two choices. We can either hope or we can kind of die in our shell and isolate and be away from the world. And it was really a courageous thing for both of us because she was hoping that the situation in her life would resolve. And I was hoping that I would get out of prison, that I would get, be kind of validated with a second chance. And so these 5-minute phone calls turned into 20-minute phone calls, turned into hour-long phone calls. And after a month of talking, for an hour or 2 hours every day, she just told me that she loved me, which was, I was in the same place. I was feeling the same way, but it was kind of weird because this wasn't like some woman who just writes prisoners. This was a really successful, really established, really respected reporter in the community, like that fell in love with me, the guy in prison. Like this seems kind of crazy, but it did. We developed this really, really incredible relationship. But the funny part is, up to that point, we had never met in person, right? Like, so we had done a phone interview for the TV story, and we've been talking on the phone in prison. We even had these video visits, these old like 1970s televisit things that are just horrible. And so we had never met in person. So we still didn't know. We were like, we really like each other, but we're going to have to take it slow because what if we just don't smell right to each other? Or what if there's some kind of issue? Or what if we can't be in each other's space? So we decided to take it slow. And then on August 16th this year, I had just finished doing a bunch of burpees because I think I was going to try to get on the phone with her during rec time. So I did burpees in the dorm. And, I was trying to get on the phone and the counselor came out and was like waving her hand and freaked out. And I was worried because a lot of times when the counselors come get you, it's not good news. It's, your mom died or something happened to your brother or, somebody's sick, you need to call the hospital. And so I was a little worried, but I got into the office and somebody was on the speakerphone and said, Mr. Crossan, are you sitting down? I said, no, why? She said, because you're leaving Coffeewood today. You've been granted a pardon. And I just hit a knee and started crying and just didn't know what to do, but also didn't really believe because it was like there was that whole idea of hope was still terrifying because I was like, if I believe they're letting me out, like, no, I don't know if I can do that. So I went back and I like took a shower and I called this kid over. There was a kid, he didn't have any support on the outside. He didn't get any money. He was just struggling. So I said, look, man, I'm going to put all my stuff in a bag. And if I come back, I need it back. But if not, I want you to have this. So take my shoes, take my food, take all my stuff. I want you to keep this. And then sure enough, they called me out and I got to sign paperwork for my pardon. And I was like, wait a minute, this might actually be real. And then they gave me an escort. And like, because I was a free man at that point, I couldn't be in prison unescorted. So I'm like walking around with a lieutenant and a sergeant on my side. And I was like, when I walked back to the dorm to pack my stuff up, everybody thought I was getting locked up. They're like, what did Jesse do? Like, what's happening? And then people found out and everybody started coming over and crying and giving me hugs and shaking my hand. And it was amazing because I was able to like give my stuff away. I was able to give these guys who are, usually feel kind of lost in the middle of COVID, locked in a dorm, unable to do anything, a sense of hope that, maybe things get better. And then an hour and a half after they told me, I walked out the front gate and I was giving my mom a hug for the first time in 2 years because we hadn't had visits in 2 years because of COVID. And so it was just this bizarre transformation. And then still, I was waiting to meet Courtney, who I'd been in this relationship for 7 months, but who I'd never actually met in person. And we had to figure out if this was going to work. So we pulled one driveway over from the prison into a farmer's driveway in some cornfield. So I'm waiting there because it took, she had 30 minutes notice and it was a 45-minute drive. So I'm waiting there and then Courtney drives up and like, I'm meeting this person for the first time. And there's this huge sense of like, well, what do we do? And it was perfect. It was incredibly comfortable. It was amazing. Like we had kind of reverse catfished each other You know, a lot of people will put on their best self or use a filter on their dating profile. We sold the worst version of ourselves because we didn't want the other person to be disappointed. I didn't want to be like, yeah, you know, I really take care of myself or whatever. She thought I was like overweight. She thought I was unhealthy. She thought I was like, you know, she had seen this video visit picture that was like up my nose because that's the way the camera was situated. She was like, you know, I think he might be a little deformed, but I really love him. I think we can get past this. And we were both far more attractive and far more like compatible than we even thought. And so we started this amazing relationship the day that I got out of prison with, you know, an hour and a half's notice, which has just been bizarre because, you know, I went and Courtney and I went and were able to like spend some time together. And then, you know, my mom, we had to figure life out. I had the clothes on my back and a bank card with the money from my account, and that's it. I didn't have a pair of boxers. I didn't have a pair of shoes. I didn't have anything. So we went and, you know, I got a phone because I got to be connected in this new world. And we tried to get some clothes. And I had a panic attack at Costco because I made it through the clothes aisle. Like, okay, I can get socks and I can get boxers and I can get jeans. And then my mom was like, well, we need to get this and we need to get that. And I started like shaking. I could not breathe in this huge space surrounded by people, like feeling like I was out of water, wearing prison clothes, like just completely out of my mind. And that was when Courtney and my mom realized, you know, we got to break things down for him. We got to take things one at a time or one day at a time. And that's what we did. I mean, it's been a little over 4 months. What is it? Yesterday was, or 2 days ago, were 4 months that I've been out of prison. And I've been able to transition to get my license, to get a vehicle. My mom co-signed on a loan, so I was able to pay off my court fines and restitution. I was able to, you know, start working. I was able to like get into the world. And one of the things my girlfriend suggested, she said, you know, you really need to do your story. You need to share your story because people are going to resonate with it. And I was like, why is anybody going to care? I've just been in prison. Like, this isn't a big deal. So she said, you know, I want you to record when you go up to Humpback. So there's this place in Virginia called Humpback Rock that's just this beautiful hike. And every time I was in prison, or the whole time I was in prison, I always thought, you know, I'm going to go up there one day and I'm finally going to like let this all go. I'm going to go up there and I'm going to cry. I'm going to go up there and I'm going to scream. I'm going to go up there and like be done with this. I get to take this armor off after 19 years. And so I did. I went up there and I made a video of talking about what I had gone through. And I put it on TikTok. And I was like, I don't even know. TikTok's where people like dance and have cat videos. And I have no idea. And within like a week and a half, it had like 15,000 views. And I was like, wait a minute, like, what's going on here? And so this thing has happened where I've gotten this amazing platform to advocate for second chances for people who don't have them and advocate for resources that guys in prison don't have that will not only help them rehabilitate, but will keep society safer because they won't get out and reoffend. They won't get out and create future victims. And people say, well, it shouldn't be my responsibility to take care of that. It's like, well, that's our role as society. Either we say it's okay for people to commit crimes and not get support and not get help, or we help them. And you can't complain about the crime if you're not giving people the resources they need to change, to better themselves, to be able to get a job, to deal with their emotions, the things that other people don't have. And it's been really frustrating because people say, well, that's the family's responsibility. And I'm thinking, you know how many people I talked to who told me foster care stories that made me cry? You know how many people I talked to whose family members were the ones who were hurting them, who were abusing them, who were getting them strung out on drugs? Like the idea that the family's responsible, that's great if you grew up in a nice house in a nice neighborhood with a nice family. If you didn't, you just don't even understand the experience of what somebody is going through. And it makes me so angry because people are judging people without walking a moment in their shoes, without understanding the experiences they've had. Because I met some really amazing guys that had never had a chance. And their biggest problem was, besides trauma and besides addiction, no one had ever helped them believe that they could do better. They literally never imagined getting out of the neighborhood they grew up in. They never imagined not going to prison. They never imagined not doing anything else. And nobody had ever encouraged them to because their family said, well, you'll be locked up by 17 like your brother. Well, if that's what you hear your whole life, you're going to believe that. And so one of the things when I was mentoring was I wanted to work with guys specifically who had trauma and who had addiction issues because I'm familiar with both. And again, some of the stories, some of the foster care stuff absolutely broke my heart and destroyed me. There were plenty of days that I went back to the cell and I just had to close the door because I could not deal with anybody else because I was so racked with emotion that I needed a break. I needed something to, you know, kind of take down the stimulation. And so again, being able to be out here and advocate and say, hey, you know what, if these guys got the trauma-informed care they need, maybe they would be able to move forward without reacting the ways they do. These guys got the addiction support they need, maybe they would be able to turn their lives around. And it's not that everybody will. There's no treatment that's going to fix every trauma, it's going to fix every addiction, but giving people the resources then puts the onus on them. But it's like giving a guy, you know, who needs a wheelchair, no wheelchair, and saying, well, just get up and walk to Walmart. At least give him a wheelchair. If he doesn't want to go to Walmart at that point, you're right, it is on him. But if you give him the tools he needs, then it's on him. And we can't blame, you know, we can't say, oh, well, you know, the system did this, the system did that. No, we finally gave him the resources and he has to be accountable. Yeah. So that's my story.
Wow. Wow. I am lost for words, and I love the energy. I love your realization. I love the fact that you mentioned gratitude. There's so much meat in your experience. And I'm going to stay away from the word story because it really was your experience. I'm not sure where to start, but my first thing is I want to touch base on this. And just the last thing that you just mentioned just now was people need support. And there's a difference between help and support. And you could help somebody to achieve something, or you could help somebody walk or whatever like that. Let's say, like you get, for your example, someone in a wheelchair, you could help someone and they're like, let's say they want to walk, like learn to walk. You could help them walk. But that support piece, when they are down and out, when they need someone there to say, to cheer them on and so on and so forth, that's a support piece that I believe that society in general is missing. Because a lot of people, I find, they just say, they either throw money at something or throw like a quick resources without actually really supporting people through those times and tribulations. Remember that one saying that says, teach a man to fish and he will never go hungry again. That is a type of support. If you're going to help somebody so like, for that example, you be giving someone fish. So therefore you're like, oh yeah, here's some fish. When you teach somebody how to fish, that's you showing support. And therefore that person will be okay. There's a few things I like. I love this. I love this. You are fantastic, Jesse.
Thank you.
One thing I love, well, there's a lot of things I've been writing down while you're talking. 19 years. That's big, because technology, everything around you must have changed. And I was going to touch base on it, and you touched based on it when you mentioned that you went to Costco. And it really is true. When you're in however big the cells are, and then you go to a big supermarket and you see a bunch of people just going around and touching you and bumping into you. And again, now it's COVID, so you got masks over their face. It's a huge shock. So I must ask, are you still dealing with that right now? Or do you still have ways or the mindset of you being in prison? Because the reason why I asked that question, I spoke to someone that was in prison for 24 or 25 years. And when they came out, again, that was a shock for them. And they noticed that they still had certain behaviors that they kept in prison coming back to outside, like back in society, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, I think there's some PTSD in there, and there's some bad
Yeah.
habits. One of the biggest TikTok videos I did was weird habits from prison, where I talked about some stuff like that. But it's still uncomfortable being in a crowd that I don't know. And this sounds strange, but in prison, you learn to read a room really well. You learn to read people's intentions, and you learn to read the energy in the room, because when things get quiet or things get tense, it's a totally different energy than when guys are just playing and going on about what they're doing. And that's been really helpful. But the problem is the whole world is tense right now. The whole world is worried about COVID and worried about what's going on, and people aren't comfortable. So I go to a place and I feel that, and I'm immediately on guard, and I'm looking behind me and seeing who's going to my blind side and what's going on, because what tension means to me is a very different thing than what it means for most people. And I've had to relearn that. And I have to relearn. In prison, there's a sense of, God, I don't even know how to describe this. There's such a sense of intentionality about everything. People are so conscious about space that if somebody bumps into you, it's generally an intentional thing rather than an unintentional thing, because you don't want to bump into somebody unless you're not going to bump into somebody unless you want to, basically. So there's this then sense of, okay, taking things personally or taking things as an intentional act, and this kind of trauma-based thinking, and it's all about dominance and appearance and trying to set a hierarchy. And so that happens out in the world. When somebody bumps into me, my first reaction is immediately to tense up, to see who it is, to find out, is there like some game I have to play with this person to figure out this role? And then I have to stop and be like, wait a minute, like, I'm out in the world, like, people bump into each other all the time. It's an unconscious act. And strangely, people are a lot less considerate out here in the world. I'm much happier out here. I'm really glad to be here. But there is a certain level of respect and a certain level of consideration in prison that I don't see in the world. And it's been a really big shock. And I've had both prisoners and guards tell me the same thing, that the guards say, yeah, I feel more comfortable in prison because I know where everybody's at. I know guys are going to speak to me a proper way. I know we're going to be able to get along. And so that's been just an adjustment. And I mean, I'm dealing with it. And I'm incredibly lucky to have a support network. The Zen teacher, the guy who taught me to meditate that I've been working with for years, is also a Gestalt therapist. He was one of the guys who helped my whole transformation. And I talked to him every week for 12 years, and I still talk to him every week. Right now I get to go have lunch with him, some days. So I've been able to process with people. I have an amazing girlfriend who gives me a safe space to experience things that I don't understand. I mean, there have been times that I have broken down. There's one time in particular that I just had a complete breakdown. Like I thought I would go up to the top of the mountain and cry and everything would be gone. No, trauma doesn't work that way. Trauma's not on our timeline. It comes out when it comes out, and it comes out in difficult situations. It comes out in interpersonal conflict. And I had somebody who was willing to be there with me through the worst experience that I could imagine and still love me and still support me and still accept that, hey, we can do this together. And I've never had that before. I've never imagined that before. So I've been able to heal, but yeah, I still probably have some things to work on.
You mentioned at that time, I'll say a friend of yours that did the robbery and the shooting. What happened to that person, if you know anything about that person?
So the robbery I did with three other guys. They were sentenced to 2.5, 4, and 8 years. So they were all out of prison, 11 or 12 years ago at the earliest, or at the latest with good time. I have not been in contact with but one of them, and the only contact we had was he wrote a letter in support of my clemency that basically said, this guy's not my friend. I don't want anything to do with him. But what happened was fundamentally unfair. I've been out here working a job, getting married, having kids, paying taxes for 10 years, and he's still in prison, and we did the same thing. This doesn't make sense. And I was really grateful for that. I thought that was an amazing act on his part, but otherwise we haven't had any contact.
That's good. That's good. One thing you touched based on is gratitude. I just did a podcast last week, and that person started a website, and he went through flushing. He had flushing bacteria, and from that he showed a lot of people from the community supported him. So then his whole theme now is called TAG, which is the attitude of gratitude. And it's interesting that you just said that as well. So if you don't mind, let's talk about that. And what does that mean to you?
So, I mean, I've heard it described in a lot of ways, but it really is, we have a choice every day. We can sit here and we can find the things we're thankful for, and we can focus on those. We can find the grievances we have and the things we want to complain about. And it's a question of what we feed energy into, because where that energy goes, it's going to feed on itself and it's going to grow. And my choice was to feed gratitude, to wake up every day. I'm part of a gratitude list, an email list. And I'm actually worse about that than I should be. But it's incredibly helpful because I get up and I write out what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for the partner that I have in my life. I'm grateful every day to get out and not be in prison, to get up and be able to walk outside. I'm grateful to feel the wind on my skin. I'm grateful for food that doesn't come in a tray and look like a horrible school lunch. And then it's much deeper than that. I'm grateful for the support I have. I'm grateful for the opportunity to reach out to other people. I'm grateful for the place that I'm able to live, which is ideal for me. I realized that I could, again, focus on those things that I have that are in my life that are amazing. And the big lesson for that was in prison, because it's easy out here. I mean, we have so much, no matter what's going on, there's something to be grateful for. But there would be a time that I was in the hole when my dad died. I'm literally in shackles finding out my dad dies. It was hard to find gratitude in that moment. But there were things, because I realized that I had somebody who checked on me. The psychologist came down and said, look, I want to talk to you. What do you need? How can I help? And I was grateful for that in that moment. There was always something, no matter how low I went, no matter how bad things were, there was always something to be grateful for. Even if it was just that somehow I was finding the strength to get through the day. I was finding somebody that I could reach out to. I was finding some way that I could be helpful to another person to take my mind off what I was going through. And focusing on that has really changed the way that I see the world.
That's amazing. I honestly would say that not a lot of people would go the route that you go through, trying to get a degree in prison, making the most of it, using the system in the prison to be more educational, getting that learning, the skill sets to find a job outside of work and going through that. So what was your, I guess, push towards that?
It was the love and support I received. Like I said, I had people that were in my corner that believed in me, that encouraged me, that wouldn't let me sit on my ass. That would kick me and say, no, you're going to keep going. We're not going to let you give up on yourself. And that allowed me to build an identity around being competent and being capable of these things, because I didn't think that. Remember when I was sitting in the jail and I was starting the college class, I was like, there's no way I'm going to get through this class. There's definitely no way I'm going to get a degree. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I graduated from high school, but there's no way in the world. And I took that class and I struggled because my brain was still addled. I mean, when I first got locked up, I could not read a sentence without forgetting what the beginning of the sentence was about. I could not think, I could not communicate. I was just destroyed from the drugs and alcohol. And as I slowly built myself back together, I realized that I was actually capable of these things. And I realized that it was amazing. Being able to be capable of things and learning things was a good feeling. Rather than getting high, I could actually just do things that felt, satisfying. I could connect with people. I could learn things. I could be of service. And realizing that really changed the way that I process things. And that, some people don't and probably never would take advantage of the opportunities in front of them.
Mhm.
But I think it's really difficult to say that people wouldn't take advantage of them because they're not available for most people. Most people don't have that option to go to college. I mean, it costs thousands of dollars. You know, like I said, it took over 15 years. And if people had that opportunity, I think more people would. And that's really what I argue for is please give these resources to people. Teach people to deal with their emotions. You know, DBT is a wonderful thing. Trauma-informed care is a wonderful thing because people often don't know. Nobody's ever modeled healthy behavior. Nobody's ever modeled the fact that it can be cool and beneficial to get an education. If every success story you see is somebody who's selling drugs or doing something that you can't do, well, you're going to feel like your only choice is to sell drugs. When you see somebody who builds a business, who you see somebody who learns a trade and is able to like take care of their family and able to go on vacation and do things, it gives people a sense of hope and a sense of competency. And unfortunately, most of the people that I met in prison never had that model.
Mhm. Very, very true. That's touch based on so much things right there. That was a huge golden nugget in this whole conversation. Two things I got to mention. You mentioned TikTok. What's your TikTok name?
At second_chancer. So second_chancer. Because that's, I mean, again, I got a second chance and I want to advocate for those people to get the treatment they need to be able to get a second chance. You know, I want to make sure that people have that opportunity. And then once they've done the work that they can do, once they've prepared themselves to re-enter society, they have that chance.
Very true. Any final thoughts?
I'm grateful to be on here. That's been the thing that I'm so grateful for about technology. You know, there are a lot of neat things. There are a lot of terrible things about trolls and people being hateful. But the thing I'm so grateful for is the opportunity to connect with people. Like you're in Canada, we're thousands of miles, or I don't know, a few thousand miles apart, and I'm able to have this conversation with you. And that was, 4 months and 3 days ago. That was inconceivable to me. So I'm grateful to be here.
Well, Jesse, from what I'm hearing to you, just from today, I will guarantee it right now that you will be such an amazing part of society and in your community. You mentioned words, which is key. And I think what makes a society is servitude. And it looks like you're here to serve the community in which you want it to be better and get people, whether they experience what you've gone through or they want a second chance in life. It looks like you're aiming for that. And I'm very, very proud. And just thank you for just letting me hear your experience.
Thank you.